What's up, everybody? Back tonight. I'm back tonight with a very special guest, Michael Angello. We're actually coworkers. I've known him just from social media and other stuff, work stuff, for a couple of years now, and we got to hang out last weekend at 2 weekends ago at NRA convention. He's a pretty cool dude, and I wanted to have him on here. So, welcome on, Michael. How are you tonight?
Hey, very good. Thank you so much, Pat.
Cool. Yeah, it was cool to finally get to meet you. It's always weird who I get to meet when I'm out there. It's always a fun time. You know, there's always different people from GP and from PTH and from Unlimited Service Group there. It's always just a whirlwind. I'm amazed that so many people actually know like what I do and this kind of stuff. And then, it's always cool to meet other coworkers. So it was cool to meet you, and I had a lot of fun hanging out, and can't wait to do it again.
Definitely next year.
So the reason I wanted to have you on here is because you have a pretty cool story. We were talking in the car rides, the restaurants and stuff about everything you've done. So I had no idea you were actually a tech for a while. And before that, you were in the armed forces. I'm not sure which branch, but you were a nuclear technician?
Yes. Yeah, I was in the United States Navy right out of high school, and I worked on nuclear reactors. I was a mechanic working on nuclear reactors, but it's a fun school, really great environment for learning and things like that. I've always been kind of a little bit heavy on some book smarts and things like that, but everyone was going to college, and I just, like most of the technicians in this field, you just don't see yourself studying for 4 more years after school. You're like, man, I'm done. I'm ready to go do something. And that's kind of what I did. So took the ASVAB test and scored really high and met with every single recruiter from all the armed services. But the Navy one kind of spoke to me a little bit because he goes, look, we got this special program just because your ASVAB score. He's like, I want to get you into it. And the more and more he talked about it, working with your hands on giant pumps and motors and all the cool stuff that you could do, I was like, I'm in. The seal of the deal, though, and the bonus for graduating through the schools now is significantly more if anyone's looking at this. But for me, it was $15,000 upon completion of school. And then I also had a $50,000 grant to go to any college I wanted on top of the Montgomery GI Bill. So every piece of college that I took after the service has been absolutely free to me, which is awesome. I think currently for a nuclear technician, once they make it through school, I think it's upwards of $40,000 to $50,000 right now.
Wow.
So, and then re-enlistment bonuses for each one of these guys, for you do your first initial 6 and then you get up for 4 more, is $50,000 to $60,000 for 4 more years, which is amazing. So really great program, learned a lot of really great things. Served my time, got an honorable discharge. Kind of wanted to spend a little bit more time with my family, and I'd gotten injured while I was deployed once, and some of those injuries tend to relapse and hurt. So I was like, I want to try something a little safer now. So I ended up getting out of the service. And my in-laws had already moved to Tucson. We had 2 young kids, and my wife's like, I really want to be around my parents. And I said, all right, let me see what's around there. And there was just north of Phoenix is a nuclear generating station, Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station. And I was like, oh, I'm a shoe in there. I'm just getting out of this. Did a online application, got approved. They're like, come out and visit us. So flew from Virginia because I was still kind of transitioning. They're like, you're hired 100%. Easy. They're like, this is piece of cake. And I'm like, all right, cool. So we started looking for places to live. And right before I was to move out there, I got the phone call that nobody wants. And they said, look, we have an unplanned shutdown of one of our reactors. It's going to be a 4-year shutdown. They're like, we're in a hiring freeze. So yes, you were technically hired, but it's probably going to be about 2 years before we can bring you on. And I went, oh. So plans changed. We ended up moving in with my in-laws, which was very short-lived, by the way. I don't recommend moving in with family after you're grown and with kids.
I've been there.
Everyone has to be there, right? So I think it was less than 3 months. So I was like, no, we're getting our own place. But, at this point, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. So, again, looking through all the help wanted, I happened to notice that there is so much stuff in Arizona for HVAC. And I was like, hey, I've got a little bit of HVAC background. I mean, that was partial, some of the stuff that we learned in the military, how to take apart units, clean them, things like that. So I applied to a ton of places. One place in particular gave me a call up, and it's this little company. It was called Atlantic Service and Supply. And went through the interview, and they're like, we like the military guys. We're going to hire you on. They're like, we're going to hire you on as a helper. You're going to do mobile home air conditioning installs. Yeah, which, to me, I was like, all right, whatever. You're going to pay me. I'm like, I need a job, right? So, spent about a year and a half there. And in that year and a half, I went from the helper to an installer to an actual technician. So I was kind of just out and about troubleshooting all the units that we'd installed or any other mobile home units. Well, unfortunately, that business went under. And it just so happened the day they let us go, I'm driving home and I see this truck driving down the road, and it says now hiring skilled technicians. And it was a company that was called Tucson Restaurant Equipment and Service Company, or Tresco, right? And so I wrote the number down, get home, I give them a call, and the general manager, Jeff Markham, picked up. This guy, he is such a character, but again, he kind of influenced the technician that I was. Awesome guy. He's like, why don't you come in for an interview? So I come in and we're talking. He's like, do you have any clue what we do? I said, yeah, I looked you up. You guys do restaurant equipment. And he's like, all you've done is HVAC, so you don't know anything. He's like, what do you know? And I go, I know electrical. I said, that was burned into my head in the military. I know, wiring and voltage, all that good stuff. And Ohm's law, everything. And he's like, okay. He's like, let's put you to a practical. So my interview, he takes me out into their shop, and they've got a 3-door freezer that the time clock had burned up on, and some of the wires to the fans had burned up. And he literally grabs the bulk of the wires and just yanks them out, and he goes, rewire this. And I'm like, what am I getting into here? But I'm like, all right, sure. So slowly but surely he comes back, 45 minutes, hour later, I've got it rewired. He goes, when I plug this in, if it works, he's like, you're hired. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I was plugged it in, and sure enough, everything fired up just right. Now, granted, the time clock was not wired right, but I have never wired a time clock in my entire life. Mm-hmm. But I had enough wires in the right spot that the fans came on and the compressor came on. That was all I cared about. So I got hired on, and I trained for like 6 months with a technician named James Clements, who happens to work for General Parts. So worked with him for a while, got my feet wet, started getting into the technician stuff, and business started to dry up. There was another big competitor in town, and they were taking a lot of the business. So for like 6 months, I got to do installs with them. They had a separate branch that did full restaurant kitchen sets. Anything from walk-ins to reach-ins, remote systems, you name it. We would go in there and we'd set an entire kitchen. We did a ton of schools and convention centers, hospitals, things like that. We'd actually go in there and we'd spend 2 or 3 weeks there setting the entire kitchen. That was a lot of fun, but again, not for me with 2 young kids at the house and leave my wife alone for that long a time. I mean, she experienced that in the military and was like, she was frazzled. So with everything being slow, I said, well, let me see what else I can find out there. And I ended up working for this franchisee that owned all the Wendy's out here in Tucson as one of their facilities mechanics, which, again, loved working on all the equipment and getting the experience. But as a facilities maintenance guy, even though you're still getting paid a pretty decent wage, you're unclogging urinals, you're striping parking lots, you're painting buildings, you're fixing stucco. And for me, that wasn't in my wheelhouse, so to speak. I mean, I could do it, but I'm like, I'm not the man that you want fixing your drywall. I'm like, if you ever saw some of the drywall repairs I've done, you're like, no. Again, I can't. It's something that's not for me. So I ended up departing with them, and I spent 6 years with a company called Service Solutions Group out here, which is now known as Tech 24. Again, went as a technician, and by the time I left them, I was their lead service technician. So, we had 16 guys there, and we'd had different meetings and things, and it was a really great atmosphere, really great, again, just getting into this industry and really finding my place and the love that I had for the industry. Because again, there's a lot of people out there that have no clue what we do for a living, or that these places exist. Before I have ever heard of Tresco, I'm like, I never even thought of who fixes restaurant equipment.
Yep. It's amazing that I almost say 98%, 99% of the population has no idea this job even exists. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
It is, and it's it's such a niche industry, but it's an industry where you can make good money. And believe me, when I left Service Solutions Group, I was making good money. Mm-hmm. The problem is the injuries I had from the military, my back and my shoulders, and I knew I couldn't continue hoisting compressors on rooftops and running big fan jobs and things. My body couldn't take it, and I knew it, and I was going to hurt myself or hurt somebody else. So, I was actually visiting with the lady that was the dispatcher over at Tresco, and she's like, "Yeah, we're bought out by this company, General Parts." And I'm like, "Oh man, sounds like it was kind of rocky." She goes, "No, it was actually kind of nice. They came in, they did a lot of computer stuff, because when we were there, it was all paper tickets. They're like, no, everything's computerized and digital." And I said, "That's really cool." I said, "I'm looking to stay in this industry, but I'm like, I don't know what I can do." And she goes, "Well, Jerry, our prior service manager, is no longer with us." And I was like, "Oh." She's like, "Why don't you apply?" She's like, "I think you'd make a great manager." And I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "You were a great tech. You had, you could talk to people. You could, figure things." I'm like, "All right, sure. Why not?" So I ended up with Doug Becker, who's still the regional manager for that district. And I did a phone interview with him. I did an in-person interview with him. I did a phone interview. I think it was with Ed, because he was still a regional at the time. I can't remember if it was Ed or there was another regional. And then I did a second in-person interview. And that's when he was like, "We'll let you know." And I'm like, "Oh no." I'm like, "I did all this stuff and I'm not going to." Luckily, 2 weeks later, they give me a call and he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "We're going to take a chance on you." So, moved out of the field and into the management office. And, as a technician going to somewhere else, you do have to realize that there is a pay cut involved with that. Yep. But for most of the time, your weekends are free. So, there were some weekends where you get the call at 2:00 in the morning. "Hey man, I'm up on this roof. I really need some help." "All right, let me throw my clothes on and I'll, get out there and give you a hand," or, just load tools in and out of the truck, or whatever it was. You'd help the guy. I mean, again, they're your guys. So I felt responsible to make sure that they were safe and that, if they needed help, we could get them the help they needed too.
Yeah, that's always good. And managers behind their team, supporting their guys when they can call on the weekend. That's a huge thing. I always use the analogy so I started, and a couple months later, Ed started as a service manager, and he got moved up to branch manager. And I always tell everybody, I said, Ed is the best manager I've ever had. And I still say to this day, I said, if you had a problem or a concern or anything with a job and you bring it to his attention, if you can explain it to him in a way that he's going to understand, he has your back 100%. 100%. And it was an awesome feeling knowing that you go to him with a problem or say, "Hey, we need this tool to do this safely," or "We need this so someone doesn't get hurt," or "We need this because it's make our job easier, more efficient." And he was always the first one. Okay, if you could justify it, he'd be right there with you.
And that was, it was one of my favorite things too, is, my door was always open. If you had an issue, again, I can fix a lot of things, but there are some out there that are beyond me, but I would listen, and I think that's what a lot of the technicians need. Cause being a technician, one of the things I learned is sometimes it's a lonely gig. I mean, you're 90% of the time you're out there by yourself. Yeah. Now when you do like a rationale oven install or something, you're teamed up with someone, or, here and there you'd have a partner with you. But for most times, yeah, you're in the truck, you're all by yourself, you're doing your own thing. And, when you have issues, you need someone to be able to listen and identify those issues. Granted, like I said, sometimes you can't fix them, but just to be heard and understood is some of the cool stuff that, that we get to do as managers. Now, I was a branch manager for 6 years. I started out with Tucson. We started out, I think there were only 3 technicians when I first started. And then we were quickly down to 2 because one of the gentlemen left. But, um, when I ended up leaving there and coming into my new role, we had 11 service technicians in Tucson, and we organically started the Yuma branch in Yuma, Arizona, and we ended up with 3 technicians and an admin working out of that office as well. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of growth and potential in there.
Yep. LED Handyman says he loves your story after the military. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you did a lot of different stuff, and it's paid off. I mean, it's not always about the technical side. It's about how willing you are to adapt and to try new things and just to be there. So it's pretty cool, everything you've done so far. So,
and then now, just over a year now, I've been as the parts sales manager for the parts side of our business. So, and again, it's kind of like you said, weird how the world works. Both my kids have graduated high school. Thank the Lord for that. And they're kind of off doing their own things now. So now I've got a little bit more time that I wanted to travel and do things. And that's kind of what this position allows me. I get to travel the countryside and talk to new people and bring in new business. And, we've got a very strong team of 11 parts specialists with 2 team leads that help manage them as well. But, I've got again, it's just another great team and great people to work with. And I feel blessed for everything that I've been able to do in this industry and stay in this industry for as long as I have. And again, I've got no plans of departing this because it's part of me now. And I do a lot of stuff in the industry as well on my off time, kind of like you do, Pat. So thank you for all the off support hours that you do. But anytime, we've got a couple of technical schools that are within high schools.
Mm-hmm.
I make myself available to them anytime. If they want me to come in and talk to the kids, I go down to Pima Community College, which is our local college. They have a 2-year HVAC and refrigeration course they do. I'll go in there and talk to the kids after graduation. If they need any kind of pointers or they're looking for work, I can point them in the direction they want to. But this industry, it's after you've been in it for a few years, you realize it's a small family. And yeah, like you never know who you're going to meet at these events and people that you've seen in your past. And it's a small world, but it's a great bunch of people that work with us every day.
Yeah, I mean, I run into ex-bosses that from companies I worked for in the past. He's at a different company now. I run into him all the time at these shows, and I run into this Festa stuff. And it's like we're both in 2 totally different places. He's not the same boss he was in. I'm the same technician I was in. Just amazing to see everyone's growth, but everyone can come together. And people are like, "Oh, you're competitors, man." There is so much work out there that it's not that big of a deal, man. We may lose something to them, but we're going to steal something back. It's weird how it works. But everyone's pretty much cool. I mean, I love seeing guys I've worked with in the past that have moved to, different states or other branches and succeed and grow as individuals, as technicians. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's amazing how much everyone kind of just stays in this industry. And like you said, whether it's in one position or not. I mean, my mentor, which I would suggest any new technician getting into the field, find a mentor. Find someone that's been doing it. Find someone that you can relate to, because, again, I think that helped me learn, adapt, and grow. And it's funny. I use his anecdotes to this day. This guy named Paul Beck. He's out in Albuquerque now. I'm not sure which company he's working for, but still in the industry. And I'll tell you what, this guy was. I think he said he was 16 years old when he got into the industry, and he was working for Victory Refrigeration in New Jersey when he was 16 years old. Right. Building refrigerators, and then just kind of came up through that world and became a technician. Moved his family, I think it was out to Nevada, and then he ended up settling in Tucson, where I kind of met him in passing once, and ever since then we clicked. We talked about different things, and even though I haven't seen the guy, it's got to be going on 7 or 8 years. We still talk at least once a month to each other. What's new, what's different, the things that we're seeing out there in the field, and things that I'm seeing in my new position. He really enjoys that.
Yeah, that's cool. It's definitely a mentor is a great thing to have. So I was an electrician before I started doing this, and my dad actually did this. he worked for a company local here in Indianapolis, and they got bought out. He didn't want to be a part of that big conglomerate thing, and he retired. But some of his friends he worked with, I work with now. Greg Smith, he was good friends with Greg Smith, and everyone always wonders why I always had so good with Greg. I think it's because he was friends with my dad, so he kind of just didn't mess with me, and I kind of got in under his wing, and he's taken care of me the last 12 years at General Parts. Now we've had our ups and downs. He's getting where he wants to retire, and he's about had it, so he's getting kind of grumpy and kind of lazy. But I get it. I'll be there one day, I guess. But yeah, you gotta have a mentor, someone who can help you out, someone you can look up to. I mean, even if you're not even asking them work questions, just hey, what's going on? What are you working on today? Just that kind of stuff. I mean, it gives you a chance to break the ice and get away from work for a minute and just check on somebody, see how they're doing. So we've got a lot of younger guys working for us now in the Indy branch. One's my son. He's 20 years old. He's been here for 8 months, 8 or 9 months now, probably. He's actually buying his first house tomorrow. So I'm kind of excited for that. So, but he's 20 years old. We got another guy in here. He's probably close to 30. He's going to be on the show next week. He's actually a younger guy. He did a little bit of residential HVAC, and he's been with us probably 6 months or so. He's going to come on next week and talk about, the jump from residential HVAC to this and what kind of comparisons and stuff like that. But, I always try to reach out and check on him, see how he's doing, see if he struggles, that kind of stuff. We got to look out for the younger guys. I mean, I keep saying this over and over and over, but, I talked to Greg. He's been doing this 40 years. And he's like, these guys aren't catching on fast enough. I'm like, Greg, listen, 40 years ago, you could drive a pickup truck and have a tote of parts in the back of the truck and fix everything you worked on for an entire week. I said, every oven had the same thermostat. Every fryer had the same thermostat. I said, everything had common parts. It wasn't like it is now. I said, you got to think. I said, all this equipment has computers, miles of wire, all kinds of crazy high-tech components. I said, it's going to take them longer to learn now than 40 years ago.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because, again, when I was first a technician, I mean, the time clocks, just thinking about a standard time clock that's in freezers and things, they were mechanically driven. You could take it out, flip it around, and you could actually see the switches move.
You can see the contacts and the points. Oh, the contacts burn up. Yeah, it's not going to work.
Do that with a DTMV now, and there's you can't. It's all electronic components. I mean, so yeah, even 15 years ago, everything was mechanical, and within 15 years now, there's barely any mechanical left in the industry. Everything is computer driven now.
Yeah, I post something all the time. People are like, oh, that thing's over engineered. That thing's junk. And I'm like, no, you just don't work on it. You don't know how to work on it, so you think it's automatically junk. I said, you guys got to get over the fact of saying everything's junk. Just because you work on this certain thing over and over and over, and you think it's the best thing out there, doesn't mean it's the best thing out there. Quit saying something's junk because you don't understand it. And I'm bad about the internet. People will say something, and I want to chirp back, and generally that's all I say, and I let it be. But it's these people blaming, oh, this is junk because it has this. No, it's junk because you don't understand it. If you worked on it every day, it wouldn't be junk to you. I don't know what you work on every day. I don't work on henny penny fryers every day. I can't say they're not junk. I mean, it's people kill me.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. It's just it's hard for some of the guys that have been in this trade, like you said, that they have seen it. They've seen everything just kind of go away that they're used to working on. Mm-hmm. The Paul Beck, the guy I talk to all the time. I mean, he gets so upset when he gets to a Rationale oven now because, again, there were no combi ovens when he did this, and he's like, God, I hate these, and I'm like, because you don't know it, right? And he goes, yes, because I don't know it. He's like, God.
But that makes him a good tech because he knows why he hates it. He doesn't hate it because of what it is. He hates it because he doesn't understand it, and he's not used to it.
Exactly.
That's the kind of guys you want. They don't hate it because, they admit that there's a reason why they don't like it instead of just hating it because they don't want to work on it. I mean, there's a complete other difference in that. And that's cool that he recognizes that fact, and he's willing to say that. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah, he's willing to own a lot of the computer stuff is just beyond him. But again, it's the industry that he evolved into, and he's learned a lot. And he's a very great diagnostician. He's good at diagnosing, up until he gets to those boards and things. But again, he knows where he can get help, and that I think is key. You don't just throw your hands up because you don't know it. You can learn it, and then you can also get help on what should or should not happen inside and outside of those controllers.
Yeah, you got to be willing to ask for help. I tell all the trainees, I'm like, look, I always have my phone on me. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I said, that's just me. I live by this phone. If you have questions, call me or text me. If I don't answer right away, give me a little bit of time. I will get back to you. If you don't hear from me in a certain amount of time, call me back and try again if it's important. I said, don't be scared to call me. Don't be scared to call me before you call the factory, because I may be able to tell you how to fix it. I may be able to walk you through it in a way, explain to you where you can, you'll know from now on, and that kind of thing. I want to be there for my guys. I don't want to leave them stranded. I know how it feels to be stranded, so that's why I do what I do. I'm always there. Man, I feel phone calls from every branch. I've got guys from other companies that will call me and ask me for help. I mean, I'm just here to help people out. That's just me. I mean, I want to share the knowledge and share the wealth. So
you're very similar to him, man, because one of the biggest things I took away, and I used it when I was a branch manager to help my newer techs troubleshoot things. One of the things he told me is, I am here for technical support. If you need help, I will give you help, but you have to do the work. And I remember this one time, it was a walk-in cooler I was working. I think it was at Taco Bell or something. And I couldn't get the subcooling right. I was like, I think it's the TXV, but I'm like, let me give him a call. And he's like, all right, what's your suction and your head pressure? And I'm like, I gave it to him. He goes, what's your compressor amperage? Well, I didn't take that. And he goes, click. And I go, so I call him right back. I say, hey, dude, I think we got disconnected. He goes, no, you didn't do all the work that's necessary to figure out where your problem lies. And he's like, call me when you have that information. I'm like, but again, that taught me to dig in further to what I was doing when I was brand new. Mm-hmm. And then again, when I hired new technicians down there, when they'd call me up, I wanted to make sure they knew a process. That's the thing. You have to have a process to diagnose this equipment, right? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure that they were at least doing the process. And then, sometimes you just can't come up with that answer, but don't call me up and tell me you don't have gauges on the system and, you think it's a compressor issue. I'm like, well, how do you know? Like,
yeah, dude, that drives me nuts. I have guys call me, be a gas fryer and having pilot issues or burner issues. I'm like, what's your gas pressure? Oh, it's good. I'm like, no, that's not an answer, bud. Gas pressure is fine. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, check it and call me back. And they never call me back. Problem goes away. So when I give technical support, I try to ask questions to like lead people down that way. I ask them, I ask them the measurements. I ask them this. I ask them that. That way they know why they're checking this, and it kind of leads them to troubleshooting on their own. A lot of times you can call someone, they can tell you what it is right off the phone without even, they can tell you what it is. You just do this, it's this. But what does that person learn that's called you? Nothing. So try to spend the time to troubleshoot and to walk them through the process of what it is. And then that way they feel like they learned it on their own, and they're going to retain it and they're going to use it in the future.
And that's exactly it. They will retain that knowledge and be able to utilize that on the next service call, whenever that next service call is that they're going to have on a similar piece of equipment. Oh, that's right. I had to go do this. They get that process ingrained in them because, again, like you said, if you're calling someone up and they're just giving you the answer over the phone, it's just you've got another service technician out there that doesn't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. That's not what we're about in this industry. We're about troubleshooting and fixing the problem, not let's just throw 100 things at it, and see which one sticks.
That drives me nuts. And I can tell when someone's just guessing. I'm like, the pilot's out, so they ordered a gas valve, throw a couple pilot assembly. And I'm like, they just they just ordered everything and hopefully it works. I'm like, this ain't how it's supposed to go.
No, because the customer ain't gonna like that either. Because when they see that bill, they're gonna freak out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the guy may get it on the next time, and he may come back 2 or 3 times before he gets to it. It's not fair to the customer, and that guy's not learning anything. That guy's just learning he can be lazy and get through it. And that's the thing. We gotta do better as an industry. These guys are, a lot of times these guys are training people, and they're not teaching them why they're changing these parts. So I think it's this. Like, I don't pay you to think. I pay you to troubleshoot.
And that's exactly it. We don't think that this is the problem. We verify that this is the problem, Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot of the new technicians don't get that because they're not taught that, Mm-hmm. There's like a slight disconnect. So again, get a good mentor, especially the senior techs that we've got out there in our industry. I mean, CW that's local here in Tucson. I mean, this guy, again, has been in the industry since he was a teenager. He's seen a lot of stuff. He knows, and he is the same way though. He will not just give you the answers. He wants you to make sure that you understand why you got that answer.
Yep. Yeah. If you understand why you got that, you're better off. I mean, 100%.
Well, at that point, you can figure out what your issue is and then rectify that issue.
I mean, I'm guilty. I've been doing this 18 years now, and I'll have a guy with me, and I'm troubleshooting on my brain on the way to the job site. I'm okay. It's doing this. What should I check? And I go in. I think it's this, and I go straight to that, and it is that. But I got to remember, I got to slow down because this guy doesn't have the experience as me. So he doesn't know what causes this issue. So we need to start from scratch and work through the process and try to figure it out. And that's where I struggle a lot of times. Is I've done this long enough. I know, okay, this does this. This is, this causes this. Let's check this first. And if that is not causing, we'll see what the other issue is. And I'm terrible about it. I mean, it's great when I don't have somebody with me, but when I have somebody with me, it's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I had a trainee with me at one point, and same exact way, man. We were working on a walk-in freezer, and I troubleshoot in my mind. I know exactly what I wanted to do. We go in, and box is at like 35 degrees, and he's like, "Oh man," he's like, "Should we go up on the roof?" I'm like, "No." And so I reach behind there and I touch the liquid line, and I'm like, I look at the coil. There's no ice on it. I'm like, touch this up, and he's like, "Why are you touching that?" And I'm like, "Well, that tells me, what the compressor's doing or not doing." And he's like, "Oh, that's how we're." I'm like, "No, that's not how you're supposed to do it."
Yeah.
No, I'm like, after you've done this for a while, you can start sensing temperature differences and figure out, like, I've got low latency heat in my liquid side. There might be a plug in the coil. There might be a plug up in the liquid line filter. Things like that. But as a new technician, those kind of create some bad habits.
Yeah.
And I will admit I had plenty of bad habits as a technician.
I do too. So my post yesterday was about using like the job link probes to diagnose like an R290 unit without getting into it to determine if it's low. And my friend commented, he said, "Man," he said, "I just check temperatures by hand, and I can, then I know." I was like, "I know. That's what I do too, but I put this out here to show that this is the proper way to actually do it." We've been doing this long enough we can get away with doing that, but the guys fresh in the field haven't been. So I've got a lot of guys that are new to this or thinking about getting in this industry, and I can't be just grabbing, touching this, it's low on charge. I can't do that because they're not going to know why I'm touching that or what I'm looking for. So,
well, these guys will start getting into. They'll see you doing these things and they'll try to emulate them. But what they got to realize too is we have already visually checked multiple things before. I had this new guy that was like, he was getting into this thing, and I'm like, "Dude, Tim." I'm like, "This is not right, buddy." I'm like, "Have you verified that everything in the system's right?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I go, "I took one look at that condenser underneath the this reaching we were working on. It's plugged." And I'm like, "Now you're trying to troubleshoot a refrigeration issue when we don't have the refrigeration circuit working." I'm like, so those are the things that, when you're teaching, that's, like, hey, we got to make sure our condenser's clean. We got to make sure the evaporator's clean. We got to make sure the fans are, but we do those visually without even thinking about it when we walk in. Those are just things that we look at, boom, 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 and then we're off on our diagnosis.
Yeah, before you ever start checking temperatures or anything else, you want to make sure you get a clean coil, you can condenser fans around. You want to give it every chance in the world to run on its own before you interfere.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Because you'll chase yourself. I've done it, man. Dirty coil. The worst is like a customer will brush their coil out, so it looks clean, but like it's packed full of shit. So I tell all my guys, when you guys take a flashlight, the coil's clean. I'm like, shit, put the flashlight up against there. Can you see light through there? No, my coil's dirty. Before we do anything, we're blowing this coil out. We're going to clean this coil first before we go anywhere else. And guess what? 30, 40% of the time, that's all it took to blow the coil out. Well, we brushed it off because it was clogged. Well, you brush the surface off, but, it's 3 inches or 2 inches of coil, and the first half inch is clean. The other inch and a half is packed full.
There is no air flowing. They're like, "But the fan, I can feel it." I'm like, "Yeah, you feel the fan pulling air around itself." I'm like, there is no air coming through. And then we had a contract. I think it was like Polar Ice, and they had all these ice merchandisers in the grocery stores. And yeah, guys would go by and they're like, I don't know what's going on. And next thing you know, they're replacing the condenser fan because the amperage was high. And I'm like, don't think that really was the. You go back and sure enough, that's all they had done right before you got there. They took their little brush and brushed everything off. And there's 2 inches of grease packed in that coil from everything in that place, like.
Yeah. People want to skip so past the obvious, and it's just slow down and look at the obvious first. So
keep it simple, man. Tell everyone that. Keep it simple. Check it. Like you said, make sure everything's good and clean. Make sure all the components are running. The other one that gets under my skin so bad is, and it's proliferated this industry, is when you have a sight glass on a unit, everyone's like, pack it till the sight glass stops bubbling. I'm like, no, God, no.
Yeah. I've got tons of units out there that are from the factory with sight glasses, like self-contained units, and it says 13 ounces. And I've done this. I've done it. I put refrigerant in there until it was full, and it was 16 or 17 ounces, and it was high, super high head pressure. It cooled like shit. It would never get down. I pulled 3 or 4 ounces out of there. Sight glass is flashing. Guess what? Pressures are perfect, and it's cooling like a champ. I'm like, you can't always trust that sight glass, man.
And again, even on remote units like walk-ins and things, you can't trust that. I mean, it is there to show you that refrigerant is moving. It is not there to say, oh, the system's full, we're good. Because again, especially like here in the desert, I mean, you pack it full, you come back in the wintertime, and that thing's cycling on high head pressure because it's got so much, it doesn't know what to do with, things like that. So it's just, that's a major irritant right there. Is they're like, pack it full. I'm like, no, don't.
No, I always go by, especially if there's a recommended charge, I go by that first, and then go after that. I mean, guys are just in the habit though. Oh, sight glass full, go from there. And like you said, here we have a problem, especially like in the schools. They'll get new boxes or new equipment over summer, and they charge the full sight glass. Well, guess what happens in October? It gets cold here.
Yeah.
Guess what? All these things have headmasters, and they fall on their face because they don't have enough charge. I get this all the time. October mornings, customer calls in, oh, our coolers can't keep up, our cooler's warm. And by the time you get there in the afternoon, it's heated up, sun's beating on stuff, and it's running great again. And I'm like, guys, you got to do equipment number. Who charged it? If it's us, I'll go back and look. It's probably not enough refrigerant. If it's somebody else, hey, call them back out because they didn't charge it. I've got a school that had like $200,000 of the walk-ins taken out and built, and I walked by there. It was like October 15th or something. I walked by, and I'm like, let me check the sight glass. Sight glass was flashing because it was like 30 degrees in the morning. Headmaster just bypassing. You can just grab lines of fill. And I walked in. So you guys' coolers warm? I'm like, yeah, we're trying to figure out what's going on. So I was like, call those guys back out to build them and tell them to come finish charging these things up.
Yep, there you get the right, and that's the hardest thing is, you guys have it when it starts getting cold. We have it when we get the monsoons because the humidity that comes with it. Normally we're 8 to 10% relative humidity out here. Monsoon time, it's 90% relative humidity, and we'll get that first thing in the morning. Cooler's not working. You come back in the afternoon, and it's that 33 degrees, 34. It's perfect. Oh, but what? And then two or more days in a row, they're like, nope, it's not running again. And you're like, oh, there's that dang headmaster valve again. It doesn't know what to do because it doesn't have enough refrigerant. It's trying its best to do what it can, but there's just not enough gas in there to do it.
And I always tell guys, look at the logbook, especially schools. Most restaurants should have a logbook too. Look at the temperatures. In most of your schools, they check it like 6 in the morning and like 2 in the afternoon when they come and when they leave. That's when they check temperatures. If you see that it's got a history of warm temperatures in the morning and great temperatures in the afternoon, you have a charge issue. I mean, like it's, I try beating into these guys' heads, and it's frustrating because the guys don't catch on. I mean, I get it. Not everybody's me, and I'm the first person to tell you that I expect everybody out of me, and it's the worst thing in the world, man.
So one of the other neat things that I learned too, and this was I was troubleshooting this again. It was like a little 2-door reach, and I'd been there for like an hour and a half, and I'm like, it's got refrigerant issues. Everything was clean and where I'm like, I can't get this thing to work. And I called my buddy up, and he goes, how much charge does this thing got? I'm like, 8 ounces of 404A. And he's like, have you tried to, take the charge out, vacuum it, and put the charge back in? I'm like, why would I do that? He goes, because it's 8 ounces. He's like, in 20 minutes, you could have that refrigerant pulled, it vacuum, and then you just pop in 8 ounces of virgin refrigerant and see where everything's at. And I'm like, it blew my mind. I'm like, why hadn't I ever thought about doing this? I'm like, it's less than a pound of gas. It's not like it's the end of the world. You're not going to charge your customer $800 for refrigerant. A lot of times too, you come up on a system and you can see somebody's put taps in it. That's one of the first things that I would do after verifying everything's right, is I'm like, I wonder if they charge by the nameplate or they charge by whatever they felt like that day. Because there's a lot of trunk slammers in this industry. And not all of them are bad, but there are some bad ones out there that, it just, middle of the summer, it just needed a little top off, that was it. And now, again, we're into a period where we got high head pressure. And it's like, why is it high? The coil's clean, take those few minutes, get that system evacuated and see where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. I had a guy last week call me. It was one of our younger guys. He said, hey, I think I got a restriction. And he sent me a screenshot of his JobLink probe app. So I'm like, no. I was like, someone was there. He was a callback, and he was, reading the notes. I'm like, those notes don't make any sense at all. He goes, yeah. He said, I don't know what they did. He's like, because the notes was 2 sentences for a 6-hour repair, made 0. Yeah, that's my big complaint right now. But I was like, no. I was like, you're overcharged. I said, you got high suction temperature, you got high suction pressure, and you got high head pressure. So pull it out, pull a vacuum, wait in there. He pulled it out, waited in by the data tag, worked perfect.
Yeah, see, and that's, and for a 6-hour repair to have 2 sentences, you're right. That is total garbage right there.
So what I'm trying to propose a new role. So I'm like in the middle of working on it. Steven was helping me before he left, and he's still helping me. I'm trying to get into the training side. I'm trying to get into more of the social media and the marketing side as well. But I want to set up proper procedures when you get to a call. Like when you get to a call, I want you to walk in. I want you to find the person to call it in. If they're not there, you need to find the highest manager that'll talk to you. You need to have them walk you to that piece of equipment, explain what's going on. If they can't explain it, find someone that uses that piece of equipment. They can explain it to you. Before you even work on anything, I want you to put our sticker on there, our data tag sticker. I want you to take a picture of that data tag, put it in the file room. I want you to update the equipment in the call before you touch any tools. That way, that's out of the way. Because I'm sick of going back, I'm following somebody up on a callback, wrong equipment's in there, no data tag picture. It burns my ass. Because guess what? I can't tell if the customers if we really worked on this one or this one. They may have coolers with the same model number, different serial numbers, but guess what? They didn't pick the right one. So now the customer's like, oh, it was this one, and it really was that one. Who's to tell? I mean,
yeah.
I'm not saying the customers will do that, but I can't prove that they're not if I don't have the right information.
I had a customer. It's funny that you mentioned that. I had a customer, and it was, oh, man. It was called the Broken Egg or something out here. It's changed names, but I had a manager that was doing that to me. And he's like, no, it's a callback. It's a callback. What they had done was taken this little 2-door undercounter reach in and moved it over and brought a different one. I'm like, I did not work on this. I'm like, he's like, this is the one. I'm like, this is where I worked. I said, but I know for a fact this was not the unit I did. And he swore up, and he ended up wanting just some extra service out of it. But, I don't know if that was like his employee moved it or what, but I'm like, no, and I showed him in my system that, because back then we took pictures of the serial tags, and I'm like, this is the serial tag I took a picture of. I'm like, so this is not the unit. It is not the same serial number. He's like, oh. I'm like, I worked on totally different.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't know if the customer's doing it. It's just people not looking at the right one. But, I want to do that, and then I want to work on, proper notes, proper dictation. I mean, I was sick of seeing, like I said, a 6-hour repair and two sentence notes. I mean, it was warranty call. So the manufacturer, if we give the manufacturer 2 sentences for a 6-hour repair, they don't have to pay that.
Yeah, no.
What makes you think that, we deserve paid 6 hours labor for 2 sentences? And I tell the guys, and I train them, I'm like, look, you need to explain everything you did. They're like, why? I said, because if someone from billing calls us in 3 months or sends an email, I said, you're going to be able to remember what you did here? Well, no. I said, so you're going to have to try to figure that out, aren't you? Oh, I won't be able to do that. Then write it down the first time. Quit being lazy. You're going to save so much time and effort. I said, guess what? I don't have billing emailing me, what I did on calls, because I put proper notes in there to justify my time on site.
Yeah, and that's a big problem with us. When I was a branch manager, again, the warranty process takes time. So you're right. About 3 months later, all of a sudden you're like, technician's going, I don't even remember going to that place. I'm like, oh, here we go. Now we got to figure out. But yeah, you don't have to write a book. Believe me, I don't need a novel on what you've done, but I don't also need 2 sentences. There is a happy medium somewhere in there.
Yeah,
If it was a 45-minute service call where you replaced a cord on a piece of equipment, by all means, found cord damage, replaced cord, checked, units working fine. Boom, that's all I need. But if you're replacing a compressor or a TXV or something that's intricate, or even like the burners on like the McDonald's fryers, those infrared burners, I expect more than removed and replaced burner, because I know you've got to remove more than.
Yeah.
You can't just get to that burner. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do.
Yeah, it's nuts what guys do. It drives me up the wall. And, the guy's not doing the data tag pictures, that kind of stuff, and the procedural stuff. I was like, if we can't do the procedural stuff right, how do I know you're fixing stuff right?
True statement.
And guys get so mad because I preach at every tech meeting. It's just my thing. I mean, do the easy stuff, and then we can once you get the easy stuff done, we'll work on the next thing.
That's exactly right, man. Yeah, just get the easy stuff out of the way first.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you did compressor change, pressurized system to whatever you pressurize to nitrogen leak check, you pulled it in the vacuum. What'd you pull it down to micron wise? That kind of stuff. A few numbers go a long way. If it took an extended period to pull down the vacuum because it had moisture in the system, make sure you indicate, hey, this doesn't have a lot of moisture. It took me this much time to pull a vacuum. Make sure that's justified in there. Because guess what? That thing had moisture in it. So maybe 3 to 6 months down the road, that compressor tanks because that moisture turned to acid. Well, I did note that 3 to 6 months ago, it had moisture in the system when we had this leak. That's probably what took up that compressor. You have a little bit more to fall back on. I always think about the future, and not everyone thinks like me. I'm a terrible person because, like I said earlier, I expect me out of everybody, and I can't do that. It's not fair to everybody else, and it's not fair to my brain because my brain is a terrible place to be.
Yeah, none of us want to live in our own heads, but no, I agree with you. That what you mentioned there. What did you pull it down to micron wise? So many times, talking with technicians, and I'm like, hey, I'd be like inventorying their van, and I'd pull out their micron gauge, and I'd hit the power button, and it didn't work. And I'm like, when's the last time you put batteries in this thing? I mean, you just did a compressor change, not that. I'm like, did you use this, or did you just put it on a vacuum for an hour and go, yeah, it's good? I mean, those are some of the things that we can't. It's not a fly by night thing. You can't estimate. There are reasons why we pull to under 200 or 250 or below on microns.
Yeah.
That means there's no moisture left in that system. There are people that would do, and it's like, or like, yeah, I put 18 ounces in that system. I know I did. You go and get their scale, and there's no batteries in it because they poached the 9-volt out of the scale to use in their voltmeter. I'm like,
yeah, I think during truck inventories we need tester tools. We need to verify your meters right. Check this plug, make sure it's testing the right voltage. Let's take your micron gauge and put it on your vacuum pump and see if it pulls down and it's good. That kind of stuff. Make sure these guys' tools work. That way they don't have a leg to stand on. I mean, because you could call a guy on a micron and be like, well, it could work it halfway through. I mean, but we need a way to make sure justify, hey, your tools are in working order. We don't have a problem buying tools that are broken, replacements that are broken. We'd rather the job be done right and you get the proper tools. And for you to say, well, it doesn't work, it hasn't worked, and how long, who's to say that guy's going to tell the truth? If your tool breaks, tell me, and I'll get you a new one.
Well, and those new digital gauges they've come out with too, I mean, those things are just insanely awesome because, again, before I was, to do superheat and subcool, you're writing down your numbers, you're doing the math, you're like, okay, I'm right here. And now you literally have 2 clamps built into that. You clamp on, you got your gauge, and it even tells you micron levels too. I'm like, it's all built in there. So now there's, like you said, there's no excuse not to do it right because it's there.
I mean, so Measure Quick is an app out there that ties into like all those electronic gauges and stuff. And literally you can pay a service and you can actually record like all the measurements, the vacuum, the micron, everything, decay test. You can record all that data, and they'll send it to you as a file, and we can put it in the file room with the calls. I mean, we'd have to make all the guys have those digital gauges and that kind of stuff, and that's not going to happen. But I mean, there's all kinds. The technology out there is limitless. Like everything I have is wireless. I don't use hoses unless I'm pulling a system. I'm pulling a recovery on a system. I use a vacuum rated hose kit. It's oversized. My micro gauge is wireless. I set an alarm on my phone, and I set my phone down. I start cleaning up. I start putting stuff back together. When the alarm goes off, I know I'm ready to charge or do my decay test. I'm like, there's not a reason why these guys aren't being more efficient. Everyone's like, why do you spend all money on these tools? I'm like, well, that vacuum took you 2 hours. It took me 15 minutes.
Right?
I'm like, well, that doesn't make you any more money. Well, guess what? I can run an extra call this day, and I'm more efficient than you, and I'm going to make more money because I'm more efficient than you, and I'm getting more work done. It makes me a more valuable person.
See, and that's a lot of times, guys that haven't been on both sides, because I was the same way. I'm like, oh, I'm billing out so many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I'm a great technician. Well, nobody ever explained to me that, there's a line too with that. So when I was the manager, you have to look at, how much are they billing out? How much do they cost you? There's all these different margins that are in play. So you could be looking like you're billing out a ton of money and not really doing much of anything because it's all callbacks. Or like in your case, where you run that extra call, that puts you above everyone else because now you've billed out $350,000 this year instead of $300,000. So your efficiency numbers are better, your margins are better. On paper, again, you look like a better technician, and that's part of how managers evaluate the service technician and how they're doing. Granted, that's not every tool in the toolbox. It's if you go strictly by paper, you're doing a disservice to everyone, including the company and the techs. But at least you can get a baseline of where that technician is in comparison to everyone in that branch or everyone in the company as well.
So there used to be a guy here that worked a bunch of hours like me. He worked as many hours as me. The difference was he had callbacks all the time. Every call, every day, you can guarantee at least one callback. Dude, I go weeks without a callback. And people are like, how do they make any money if you work on all those hours? I'm like, it's because I don't have callbacks. I'm thorough. I take the time to see the job through. I check extra things. I go above and beyond what I need to do to ensure that the customer's taken care of and general parts is taken care of. I'm taken care of. I said, there's a reason why I get to work the hours I do. It's because, the callbacks are minimal and I'm productive. I mean, it is what it is. And
you're not wasting the customer's time either. I think that's the biggest thing. At the end of the day, it's all about the customer because their equipment's down. They can't make the money with it, or it's a safety hazard for them. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that they're taken care of. There are companies still out there to this day. I've talked to tons of technicians that they don't get paid for their callbacks. If they have a callback, they have to go run it on their own time.
Dude, there's days I'd like to see that happen just because I know the guys are rushing and not doing the job right. And, it's like, how can we get these guys to slow down, take the time to do the job right, or actually troubleshoot it? But then everyone just quit. I mean, there's got to be a balance. But, I mean, when someone has repetitive callbacks, we need to sit down. We need to coach them, though. We need to have the service manager involved. We need to have me involved. Okay, this person's messing up on this repeatedly. What can we do to prevent this? So, Pat, go with this guy. He's going to work on this. See what he does. See what he's doing wrong. See what he's lacking. See what you can point out that maybe he needs to try to fix the situation. But until we get to that point, it's going to be kind of hard.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for
no.
getting paid for your callback. I'm just, there's extremes on both sides, but I think one of the biggest benefits to General Parts is, okay, it's a callback, but if we can get to the root cause of that and why we missed it, we won't do that again because you don't want to repeat your mistakes. And like you said, if there's a guy that's consistently doing that, there is some training that he's going to need.
Yep. And I'm a firm believer. I don't want to see anyone let go. I want to see the guys succeed. I want to see the guys advance. But there comes a point when the guys aren't advancing or, they're not catching on. That's a different discussion. But the guys that, we need to work with, they got to understand that we're not picking on them. We're just trying to make them better. You know what? And if I can make a guy better, guess what? He's going to make more money. If he makes more money, he's going to be better off. But some of these guys don't even care about that. I mean, it's weird.
Yeah, it is, and you get a mix of those. But again, when you find that good technician, that's the retention value right there. All the training that we do, all the different options. Again, with General Parts, because again, we're a very large company, but you have so much benefit to being here, and if we can get that through everyone's head that retention is the number one goal, which it probably already is, but we have to figure out as an organization how does that look on paper.
Mm-hmm.
How does retention look? Because there are going to be people, like you said, that aren't going to make it. There's no matter what we do, they're not going to be a technician.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird thing to do. It's a weird time right now, anyways. But I mean, it's hard to find good quality guys. It's hard to find guys in general that have any experience, let alone if they have bad habits or good habits. And then, you take a chance on a guy with no experience. He may be younger, he may be older, he may never worked in this field, he may be transferred over. You're taking a big risk, but then you got to, we got to figure out a proper way to assess what they're learning and what their roadblocks are. And there's so many variables out there. I mean, it's hard to decide, but we need to do better to try to figure out how to judge people as far as how they're coming along and stuff like that. I think
so. I think CW, one of the techs out here in Tucson, I think you should talk with him next time you get a chance.
Mm-hmm.
He's starting to figure that, again, 50 years in the field, he's starting to figure that out, and we've actually done a couple of like plywood mock-ups of things. Again, just to see when you throw this switch, what everything does, and guys that are having this, I think this is the number one issue, and I've seen it a lot too, is I can ask probably 100 technicians, and at least 25 of them could not draw me a circuit with a light bulb in it.
Nope.
Switch.
Exactly. And that's, I was talking about this job thing I'm trying to do, and part of it is I wanted to design mock-ups. Now, whether I make them and we ship them out, or I just draw them up and have a parts list and someone at each branch makes them, like, that's something I think we should have at each branch. Like, so I think every branch that does refrigeration should have a mock-up on how to wire a walk-in freezer with a defrost time clock.
100% agree.
And a electronic temperature control. We can use potentiometers, to adjust them. Switches, lights to indicate what's going on. Because that's what I do at Sufeso. I teach how to wire a walk-in freezer, and they're bad about it, though. They have all the components on there, and guess what? One color wire. It's red.
Oh.
Every time I go to Sufeso, I have to sit down and do it because it's all red wire and it messes with me.
Yeah.
So I sit down before class and do it myself so I know, okay. And then we tell the guys, hey, get me or the other teacher before we turn it on and make sure it's right. And I start going through all these red wires. My eyes just start to spin. My head starts to hurt. I'm like, can we get away from doing this? And they're like, well, if it has a collar, they can just look over this guy's and they can just copy. I was like, well, I get it. It's just, it sucks.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if anyone's there to cheat this. That's the other thing you got to look at. Because if a guy's there and he's being invested and he's investing his time, chances are he's not caring what his, the guy next to him is doing. He's trying to figure it out for himself. Now, there may be some of those bad apples, but yeah, definitely get with CW Birdman. That guy is. Some of his mock-ups are really intricate that he's done. 24-volt wiring, 120 volt. He's got the ETCs on these pegboards and things, and we've got a couple of compressors that you can get everything wired up and working right. Flip the switch, compressor will run for a brief few moments, and then we can shut it down just to say, look, this is everything that had to be done. Your high pressure cutout, your thermostat, everything that's in that system. This is how to make it run, and I think that's one of the biggest things. Like I said, is electrical knowledge for some of these guys. If you put them in front of a wiring diagram, they get so flustered because they don't understand what they're looking at or what they're looking for, maybe. So that's just my opinion.
It makes 100% sense, man. The wiring schematics can be kind of crazy. And like I said earlier, though, when I started, we didn't have computers. You get out a wire diagram for a combo therm or something else, and it's 40 pages, and you follow this wire, and it tells you to go to this page, C8. So you go to this page, you go over to C, and you drop down to 8, and okay, it picks up here and goes here. And I'm like, how do you expect these guys that's never seen a schematic in their life learn on German schematics? I'm like, they can't. I'm like, these guys don't stand a freaking chance.
So when I was in the military, we had these little cheat books that were, again, you know, our bosses didn't like us having them, but they identified, like, if you were working on like a feed pump system where, you know, it's feeding water into generators or whatever, it literally plotted you through all the valves, how everything was laid out, and where you could find those. Well, this book that you would carry around was 300 pages thick. So yeah, you open the book up, you're like, all right, this is where I'm at. I need to find, you know, feed pump valve 63, and you follow the diagram, and then 63, page 217. So you get to 217, you follow it, and then now you're back down to page 101. But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about that's some crazy schematics. But some of these air conditioners these days, like Lennox, oh my dear Lord, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but holy cow, some of these wiring diagrams keep on folding the map, and you're like,
and some of those companies will do the same thing, though. It'll be all the same colored wire.
Yeah.
I'm like, you guys are assholes for this. Well, we get bulk discounts for buying red wire. I'm like, whatever, man. I feel sorry for guys working on this.
Yeah, you open up a unit and everything's black in there, and you're like, all right, cool. Yeah. But see, that will tell you too who knows how a wiring diagram works. Again, you're tracing them with your fingers, but if you can't read that, you are not going to be able to figure out where your high pressure and your low pressure, you know, where your switches are, where your thermistors, everything in that system is.
Yeah, it's crazy. So sweet. So I'm gonna start winding down because it's been an hour, and people lose attention after about 45 minutes on the podcast side. So
that went quick.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. So what's your role now? You are a parts sales manager, so you handle parts sales. So do you work deals with, say, other companies or other organizations, or what exactly does a parts sales manager do for General Parts?
So part of my role is the sales portion, which I really enjoy. So I'll visit some competitors, chain restaurant, you know, casinos, hotels, things like that have their own facilities maintenance, franchise folks, you know, Taco Bell's, Burger King's, Wendy's, places like that. And I let them know who we are, what we do, because a lot of times you talk to them and they're like, never heard of you. The moment you mention Parts Town, they're like, oh yeah, we know who Parts Town is. I'm like, okay, cool. So, but I let them know who we are, what we can offer them, and that, again, and I feel this 100%, we have the best parts specialists in the world working at General Parts. These people can find parts that do not exist, and the customer service that you're going to get from us is amazing. That's cool. That's a good portion of it, and then the rest of it, I still have to deal with credits and collections, people not paying their bills, which is my least favorite part of the job. I still have a budget with budgetary numbers that I have to have. And then again, working through any issues that are at local branches, because I've got folks spread out, and working through, team issues, things like that, fire people. So pretty much everything at the branch, but then we had the sales component in there.
That's cool. So never a dull moment. So
no, never a dull moment. It is. I thought, and I'll wrap this real quick, but I thought when I got this, I was like, this is going to be a piece of cake. I'm like, I got this. I'm like, I've been in the branch. I mean, it is hectic in the branch. I'm like, I can do this. I'm like, why can't? And then I got into it, and I'm like, oh, and all of a sudden you realize all these new components and different. And then they're like, oh, by the way, we need some sales leads. And I'm like, haven't done that part of my job yet. But no, it's been a blast learning it. I love this position right now that I'm in. And again, it's all about the team that makes everything work. And I think we got a lot of great people here at General Parts.
Yeah, it's definitely I was a little scared when we got bought out. And, I sat back and I let some things happen, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I think it's there's a lot of cool opportunities coming for a lot of cool people. There's a lot further things outside of General Parts and Whaley's, and everybody else is part of the USG team. But there's a great people. There's a lot of great people, at the corporate, at the branch level, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the future for sure.
And you never know where you're going to go in this industry. You never know, and that's one of the biggest things is keep those relationships open. You don't know who you're going to see. You don't know who's going to be your boss. Things like that. Again, like you said, you could go to USG. You could be part of the actual parts town crew. You don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So there is so much in this industry that it can offer that people just don't understand. And I'm glad to be a part of it and share that part of it.
Yep, same here. So, I'm not gonna let you blast your social media everywhere because you're probably a pretty private guy. But if you guys are interested in talking to Michael about some part stuff, get a hold of me and I'll put you in contact with him. He's a cool dude. And he's really open to working with anybody. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh, thanks for plugging the parts team.
Yep. Hey, I got your back, man. Thank you.
Thank you.